Welcome to One Simple Recipe, where today we are making buckwheat blueberry muffins. We're hoping to get you one step closer to better health with all of our recipes that we bring to you each week. This week it's been 12:30, but typically it's Thursdays at 11:30. So I'm Judy Matusky. I'm a registered dietitian as well as a culinary nutritionist, and I'm happy to be back again this week. This is a really simple recipe. I love it. I've made it many times. It's from a chef and registered dietitian, Abbie Gellman. She has some fantastic recipes. This one's nice and simple, super easy, and I do think your family will love it. The bonus is that it's gluten-free. So for any of you that may need to follow a gluten-free eating plan, then this recipe is for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I did a couple of things. In this bowl here, I do have, just wanted to show you how fine this is. This is the buckwheat flour. All right, so if you're not familiar with buckwheat is not wheat. So that's what's so confusing about it. It is a gluten-free grain, quote unquote. It's really kind of a seed. It sort of doesn't fit in a lot of different categories, but we treat it as a whole grain. You can get it in many different companies make it. I just got this online at King Arthur's website. So you can buy it a lot of different places. It is considered a whole grain. It's not really a grain, even though it says buckwheat. There is no wheat. It's not a wheat. So it is a gluten-free grain, and it's ground. I think you can get it a little bit coarser ground. This is a little bit more refined, a finer grind. Buckwheats are like the kernel is considered to be a buckwheat groat, and if you're familiar with kasha, that is something that's made from the groat, the whole buckwheat kernel. We're using it now ground into a flour, which is probably we're more familiar with. So, you might know it in pancakes or in like buckwheat pancakes or crepes or even, in something like soba noodles. Those are buckwheat based. It's relatively nutty, kind of earthy. It definitely has a distinct flavor. Now in this muffin, I have to say that I don't know that you can tell there's buckwheat in it. It just sort of seems like a regular blueberry muffin. Sometimes it can be a little drying, but not this recipe. I love these muffins. I think they're really moist and great. I wouldn't recommend substituting 100% buckwheat flour for all-purpose flour or a whole grain flour because it is gluten-free. So the best advice I have is to seek out recipes that are specifically written for buckwheat flour, or you can substitute up to maybe 25% of the flour with the buckwheat flour. So that's just a little, cooking aside. All right, so we're gonna use that. I already have a cup and a half in here. So we're just gonna do our dry ingredients. We're gonna use 1 teaspoon of baking powder, it's kind of our leavener, and a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and then about a half a teaspoon of some kosher salt. And that's pretty much it. So, here are our dry ingredients. That you can do in just a little small bowl. You could probably do this all in one bowl, but I'm really following Abbie's directions, where you just do the dry in one bowl, and then we're gonna mix it all together in a larger bowl with the wet ingredients. So this is just a good way just to incorporate your salt and your baking powder and your baking soda all together and, within the flour. All right. So that we have aside. Now I did make, as you can see, I made a batch ahead of time. It does make 12. There's not 12 on this tray, but so I was running really low on my maple syrup, so I had to measure it out to make sure I would have enough for both to do a double recipe. So I already have the maple syrup in the bowl that we're going to use. The larger bowl that we're going to use for the wet ingredients because we're going to add the dry to it. All right, so we've got that. Now we're going to use some plain, I'm using non-fat. This is just Ziggy's 0% plain yogurt. You could use regular plain yogurt. It doesn't have to be Greek yogurt. This is just what I have in my refrigerator right now. You could use vanilla. That's going to be a little sweeter. So if you do it, probably just cut back a little bit, maybe on the amount of maple syrup you're adding, or we are going to add some brown sugar. So right now I have a 1/4 cup of maple syrup in here, and I'm just adding the yogurt, and then it calls for some oil. This is canola oil, and I'm going to go, and it's 1/3 cup. So we're just going to add that. And again, it's kind of nice to find recipes. I like to find muffin recipes that use a liquid oil, like a plant-based oil, rather than melted butter, just to save on that saturated fat for those of you that are really being very cardiovascular healthy. That is a great swap. And it also, I think the liquid oil helps to keep muffins a little bit moister. I think when I use butter, I feel like they get a little drier more quickly. All right, so we have 1/3 cup. Now we're just going to add an egg, just one whole egg. And 1/3 cup of cow's milk. I have just non-fat milk. That's always what's in my refrigerator when it comes to cow's milk. Again, keeping the saturated fat content a little bit on the lower side. You could probably use other milk. It doesn't really matter, any milk, but we need that liquid in here. So the milk that you might have in your refrigerator. Then, since I already have the maple syrup in there, we're just going to add 1/4 of a cup of some brown sugar. So I'm just going to pat that. And, you know, when you measure brown sugar, you kind of want to press it down because you want a tighter pack for that. All right, and that's it for the liquid ingredients. So then here they are, and I'm just going to get that egg whisked around, and then we're just kind of whisking this together just to create a just to bring it all together. And I'm just trying to incorporate kind of that oil in with the eggs and in with the yogurt. And we're just kind of breaking that yogurt up just so it's not super clumpy. But you know, again, it's very simple. You don't really have to go crazy here. All right, and then now we're just going to incorporate our dry ingredients to our wet, which is pretty typical when you're making muffins. All right, sometimes you can get away with one bowl. You probably could with this as well, but we're just gonna keep it true to the recipe. All right, so we have that, and now you can see it's a really nice, it's a nice liquidy kind of batter. It's a loose batter. It's not a tight batter. And even though buckwheat is gluten-free, buckwheat can sometimes be a little finicky in some recipes. So you don't want it to get, you don't really want them, you don't want the muffins to get any gummy. And if you over mix buckwheat flour, I feel like that's the tendency of what can happen. It can get a little gluey, and we don't want that. But again, no gluten in there to make it really tough, or a tighter muffin, and not so tender, but more it could get just a little bit gluey. All right. Now, the final thing we're going to do, obviously, is to add the blueberries, because this is obviously a blueberry buckwheat muffin. So about a cup and a half. I'm not going to measure these. I think this is probably about a cup and a half. I usually put more fruit in than what they call for, which sometimes isn't always the great thing, because sometimes it weighs down the muffins a little bit. But I just like a lot. You could just add, I think it calls for a cup or a cup and a half in the recipe. And then if you wanted to, you could sprinkle a few extra blueberries on top. But when if you're going to have blueberry muffins, you really want to bite into blueberries. I think in every bite, right? That's the way it should be. All right. Then I have this makes 12 muffins. I already have these. I didn't have any cooking spray, so I just did a pastry brush, and I just brushed them with a little bit of the oil that I used. And then all you're going to do is take the a 1/4 cup measure, which is right here, because if each muffin is about a 1/4 cup of batter. So if you take the 1/4 cup measure and use that to fill your muffin cups, it's perfect. It comes out just pretty much evenly every time. All right, so you would go around and make sure you've got plenty of blueberries in every blueberry cup. And then what I like to do, and this is just purely optional, but I think it just adds this pretty kind of, it's kind of hard to see probably on camera, but a little bit of a little sparkly kind of finish to the top, and a little bit of extra, if you want just a little bit of extra sweetness. I usually like to take the sugar in the raw or a demerara sugar, and just a tiny sprinkle. I mean, a few grains of sugar just on top, and then that gives it, when it bakes, it kind of gives you a nice little finish. And that's it. They're going to go in a 350-degree oven for, the recipe says 20 minutes or 20 to 25 minutes. These were definitely cooked for 20 minutes. I could have maybe pulled them out at 19. So, check them around 18 minutes, and then see how they look, or see how, make sure that they seem like they're finished in the middle if you're going to use a toothpick. Pull them out, let them rest, and then finish cooling them on a rack. They do freeze really well. They freeze phenomenally. So since I'm making a double batch today, I'm going to freeze these. And then I have my 1.5-year-old grandson, well, almost two-year-old grandson, staying with us, and he loves them. So there they are. Right? Look at all those blueberries. These are his favorite. He's been taking them to daycare with him pretty much every day. And he will have more now. But keep them in the freezer, pop them out. Once they're baked, they're delicious. If you're going to reheat them, I do like them warmed a tiny bit in the microwave, so maybe just put them in there for a few seconds just to warm them up. And I think that kind of brings them back to life. So anyway, give it a try. It's a delicious recipe. Whether you need gluten-free, an eating plan or not, these are delicious, and they're great summer recipes because we're using summer fruit. Now, you can probably incorporate other fruit into this. I haven't yet. I'm sure you could. Any berries would work. I can't imagine they wouldn't. So if you wanted to swap out, go ahead and give it a try. I'll see you next week. We're going to make an absolutely delicious, probably one of the easiest 4th of July themed desserts. So join me next week. Again, this month of June, we're meeting at 12:30 instead of 11:30. So I'll be back next Thursday at 12:30. See you soon. Stay well till then. Bye-bye.